Let's hit it.
Welcome to the Devon Corner, where we talk about the world's most practical breed of cattle and the roles they play in different production systems around the globe. Everything from genetics and pedigrees to cattle, pasture management, and more. Our guest today is Steve Campbell from Tailor Cattle. Steve, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also, as always, my co-host, Steve Montgomery. Good to see you, Steve. And RDUSA President AJ O'Neill. AJ, thank you for joining us as well. As always, Steve will start us with a prayer, and then we'll let AJ give us a quick rundown of this year's event and how that's all going to look. And then Steve Campbell, our guest, is also the judge of the National Devon Show this year. So we're going to talk to him about what type of cows and bulls and he favors, and just do some cattle analysis. So those that are listening on Spotify, you may want to click on the YouTube link at the end if you want to see pictures of the cattle that we're discussing. So without going too far, Steve, will you start us with a prayer, please, sir?
Sure thing. Pray with me. Father, thank you for another beautiful morning. Thanks for sun shining and hay mowed yesterday, and cows on grass and thriving and shedding out their hair coats. And thank you for this group of men and the opportunity to work with friends through the Devon Association. Thank you for AJ and his leadership, that he could join us, and Jeremy and his leadership, that I could work with him on a regular basis here. And thanks for Steve, that you have brought him to us through this event this fall, and we've crossed paths over and over. Thank you for the things he writes and his eyes to see. Lord, give us all eyes to see what you teach us through these animals. Give us eyes to see how to be better stewards of them, and to know what it means to produce thriving beef, thriving cattle that makes healthy beef for the people that consume it, and those animals that restore the world as you've created them to do. Thank you again for this morning and for this time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Well, AJ, before we get into it with Steve, tell us about the event this year and how this all came together, please.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jeremy. This year we're going to be working, we're going to be partnering with Southwest Project Grass for their 45th anniversary show that they're going to be having. But last year when we did our 400-year collaboration with the Milking Devon Association and with the other countries, it really came to light to show just how much the relationships, maybe different points of view, some very similar, but maybe some a little different. But just how this all came together and all gelled so nicely, and the relationships that kind of came out of that event. There was a lot of things we didn't foresee that really helped to, kind of take our event to the next level. So this year, it just made sense. Let's keep with this collaboration. Southwest Project Grass, they were looking forward to celebrating their 45th anniversary, the same way we were looking forward to celebrating our 400th. They're trying to put a lot of effort into it. And talking with their president, Jason McGinnis, this is something they wanted us to be a part of. And they thought that, typically Southwest Project Grass, they're focusing on, fencing systems, grazing systems, watering systems. And we were able to bring the kind of the cattle to it. And, this is why we're doing all these systems, so we can integrate livestock to those. So that, I think that just made it a great sense to have this collaboration. And I think it brings a lot of value to our membership as well. When these folks come, they're going to see different ways of watering systems. I think they were going to talk about like solar pumps and maybe gravity feed pumps. And then, some of those different ways, as well as fencers. We're looking at handling systems this year as well through Southwest Project Grass. So I think it's going to be a great thing. Southwest Project Grass also hosts multiple events throughout the summertime. I know they're working on one here in July that it's another collaboration. It's going to be Southwest Project Grass working with the Grazing Lands Coalition, which I'm a part of, for a mentorship program. And that's going to be at Eli Mack's farm in Indiana. So, the Southwest Project Grass just is really just trying to help improve Pennsylvania, help to show farmers, what grazing systems look like, and so a great organization to be a part of, and it just makes perfect sense for Red Devon to be part of this event, and yeah, really looking forward to it, and the facilities that they've been able to procure through their event makes perfect sense for a place for us to have a show cattle, and also be able to have lots of people from all over the place. So yeah, looking forward to it, and looking forward to having some sponsors be part of this event and also add value to it as well.
So that's October 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And at the end of this podcast, we will, as always, put up links to everything we discuss, including Southwest Project Grass, this year's event, and Steve Campbell's Tailor Made Cattle. Steve, tell us about Tailor Made Cattle and your journey to where you are today in the cattle world.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Funny that the name Tailor Made Cattle, I don't remember how many years ago it was. I was trying to put together a day-long amount of information to present. I think it was there in New York for the Devon Association, and before that, I was just calling my consulting Triangle C Consulting, which meant nothing. And I came up with the name Tailor, Tailor. It's like, well, the closer you are to the equator, the shorter in height, the lower in weight, and the more, if you will, if this be the heart girth, the more narrow you are up front, because you got to be able to dissipate heat. The farther north or south you get, the taller the animal is, the more they weigh, and the more of an oval up front, because you've got to be able to retain heat. Well, let's tailor an animal to where you live, your zip code, your management style, the amount of rain you get, the amount of acres it takes to run a cow. And so changing the name to Tailor Made Cattle was for a Devon event, but it seemed to be the right term. It made it more appropriate for what it was that I was trying to do. And of course, I grew up around cattle. We used to haul cattle when I was a kid, and then got into raising stockers and cows and calves, got into grass finishing, got into Devons because of the quality of the meat. And I would give these talks at the Devon Association, among other places, and I was always having some sort of a wedge-shaped cup in my hand, a styrofoam cup, a Dixie cup. Well, one day I'm giving a talk, and I've got a solo cup, and it's like, well, that's the name of this talk. It should be the solo cup. The cow's head being on this end, everything about the cows getting bigger as you go back, and I guess two of the bigger changes, just because they made sense right at the time, was to change the name of my consulting to Tailor Animals to Your Situation, and then the shape of that cow. And I guess backing way up, when I was in my teens, someone told me that a cow and a bull are like two right triangles. And that didn't make a lot of sense. But if you think about, if this is the cow and her head's on this end, well, then this would be the bull. Sex hormones shut off long bone growth in the front end of the cow first. The more fertile ones will be walking downhill. Testosterone shuts off long bone growth in the back end of the bull first. The more fertile ones will be walking uphill. And a lot of mentors along the way, Gerald Fry, Michael McDonald, Ken Redmond, Gene Meitler out of Kansas. A lot of really old books. A lot of like-minded producers and some not so like-minded. Seem like every place you go, you learn something. Someone have a comment there?
I will gladly stick in a comment because
Okay.
I appreciate a lot that you've said. One, certainly fitting the animal to the environment is huge, and we've discussed that on several of our podcasts with people in extreme conditions. And um, I remember Gerald used to say if a bunch of women sit on a bench next to each other, their hips are bumping into each other, and a bunch of men sit on a bench and their shoulders are bumping into each other, which correlates to your cup there, right? 100%. And um,
This describes it a little better to me, is that, yeah.
yeah, well, you got to turn them up this way if we're doing the people sitting on the bench next to each other.
Well, and there you would go.
But
Yeah.
there you go. Exactly. And of course, that all goes back to James Bonsma with that wedge-shaped animal and that triangular shape. And what I really wanted to comment though was what you just said. I think is huge. You know, there's four guys on a podcast. We're all going to comment on cattle here today and what we see in a picture. And you know, when you read a book, you go to a seminar, you go to a show, you get all this information and you become, you know, you put tools in your own toolkit for cattle evaluation. And, you know, not everything works for everybody. Not everybody agrees on cattle evaluation and different pieces of it, but, you know, you compile your eye from all your mentors and all this that you put together and gather from it. So, one thing I've noticed doing a lot of farm consultation is people have a tendency to jump the gun. If I say, well, you know, your cattle could use a little bit more. You talked about heart girth, a little more heart girth, little spring of rib, and 2 weeks later, I find out they sent their whole herd to market because they thought I meant that they were all bad cows. How do you mitigate that, especially because you do a lot of out of the box, non-conventional uh, cattle evaluation, but how do you keep people grounded as to how important different pieces are and in what order you should put those pieces so they have a good perspective on it? I know Gerald and I had this conversation and he struggled with that some too, of it's serious, but it doesn't mean you should cull the animal necessarily because of it. Does that make sense, that question?
It does make sense. I guess I want to back up to what you said before you asked the question, which was all these different mentors. And if the four of us all read Of Mice and Men or Old Man in the Sea or whatever and wrote a book report, it wouldn't be exactly the same words. What was the most important to you versus you versus you? So I was over time, I was listening to different people talk, and then I'd go back and try to find the source material of why they were saying what they were saying. And I'd find the dots that they were looking at. Well, in some cases, I put them together a little different than other people put those same dots together. And I guess back to, and you're going to have to ask me the question because I'm going to go off in the weeds here. I'm looking at Michael McDonald did a lot of linear measuring. And if you're just selling calves off the ranch, 40% of the profit is fertility. A cow having a calf every year and more years in a row. 30% is what's it cost to run the cow. 20% is growth, 10% is carcass tree. Well, in the red Devon, you're probably selling genetics, which is a little different than just selling calves. Anyway, so my focus 10 years ago, 4 out of 5 people that called, they wanted to know how to do grass finished beef better. Today, 4 out of 5 people that call are commercial cattlemen that want a more fertile cow that costs less to run. And so that's probably the more of what I tend to talk about. Ask your question again, because I went off in the weeds there, Jeremy.
Well, we love going off in the weeds on this
Okay.
podcast, so you feel free to do that. My question was, when you go to that commercial cattleman and you tell him, your big problem is fertility. Well, maybe I shouldn't use that, because with fertility, you probably should cull every cow that doesn't check that box. But when you find a conformational defect, right? You were talking about hooks to pins earlier. How do you keep the breeder in perspective with the weight of the critical analysis, and not
Okay.
have them either under um, under apply your guidance, or jump the gun and start sending everything to the beef program?
It's an excellent question, and there's examples. However, it's a bell curve of animals. Here's your best ones. These are kind of more of what you need. It's going to take 2 or 3 generations to change this 15, 20, maybe 30%. Maybe you don't have enough time. And in this market, maybe it's not a bad time to sell those. But usually, here's this middle 40, 60% with just the right bull. You can move those halfway to where you want to be in one generation. A lot of places you get, maybe the challenges are more epigenetic than they are genetic. I was just at a place in Kentucky here, a month and a half ago, and I'd been talking to both of the owner and the hired man, and it's like, oh, we've got a genetic disaster going on here, and I got there, and there was a genetic problem, but it was a epigenetic, the air, the water, the grass, the minerals, stockmanship, that sort of thing. It was more of an epigenetic problem. They needed a different bull. I was going to have them sell one, find another one, and it was too close to breeding, and so they didn't really get that done, and we picked a different way to use the bulls that they had. But there weren't a great deal of their mature animals that needed to go to town. It was the younger ones. Rarely have I been to a place where the majority of the animals just needed to go to town. I did get to a place, and I'm glad that I forgot the people's name and everything, but my suggestion was to basically to sell. And I don't want to get too deep into that story. But fertility is 40% having more calves. And I can go a little deeper into that if you would like, or maybe you've got another question you would like to ask right now.
Well, we could do a whole hour or two on fertility. I think we all would concur that fertility is paramount. If you're not having a calf, you're not making money, you're spending money, and hard to do much in the cattle business, purebred, crossbred, or otherwise. With that, what I want to get to, only because we have limited time, is you looking at some cattle and telling us what you prefer. And it's, I think it's different when you do a cattle evaluation. You go to somebody's farm and they're looking for you to solve their problem, so they're showing you the good, the bad, the ugly. When you're at a cattle show, you're dealing with mostly experienced cattlemen who are picking their very best animals out, and they're probably giving them a little bit better grass for a few months so that they're in the right condition to go to the show. And as a judge, it's typically harder to pick through that than going out and seeing the cows in their working clothes and in bare bones. And the other challenge as a judge is so many unknowns, right? Steve Montgomery might be in the worst drought ever and bring his cattle down, and they're in a body condition score worse than everybody else's, but they're better animals. They've just been, as you say, epigenetics. Their environment has created such, or animals have been working hard, and it makes it challenging. And the good judges of cattle can see through that, but to the common eye, fat is king, and big fat cattle are pretty. And so what I want to do is show you some cattle pictures people have sent me over the years, and some of my own mixed in there. And they're certainly not all correct cattle by any stretch, but they're cattle that people were photographing for one reason or another, and typically because they thought they looked pretty. Um, but
Jeremy, if I may,
please,
I created a little plastic card you can put in your pocket, and you know, the dotted line on the top, she's walking downhill on level ground. The dotted line on the bottom, she's got a bigger belly. She can eat enough for 3. The angle of the last rib there, the cows whose ribs angle back tend to take better care of their calf. The cows whose ribs are too vertical tend to take care of themselves at the calf's expense. And then that dotted line trying to show the slope from hooks to pins. And so my biggest focus is fertile, productive cattle. But then one of my first questions when I get to someone's place is, what is it that you're trying to do? What are you struggling with now? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Okay, let's look at what you've got. Which portion is going to get you there? Which portion do we need to get rid of? Okay. So I'm gonna try to do I'm gonna be judging them along this solo cup, head being on this end, the solo cup cow look. Fred Provenza, the home field advantage, the hardest thing to find at anybody's place. The cow that gets my attention first is the one that sheds the earliest in the spring. She typically breeds the earliest. She hairs up in the fall when it starts to get cold. Rarely her calf gets sick. She has a lot of cows. There's the 12 cow story. Maybe we'll have time to get to that later on, but I'm happy to look at pictures of cows and pictures of bulls and talk about fertility and productiveness, whatever you want to show. And you know, cow pieces parts as good as anybody, so we can use your cursor to show people what I'm talking about a particular cow. I could do a little bit more of an overview there of that, why that shape, and then the glandular function. A lot of times you go and they have adequate shape, they need more fineness, more butterfat. Sometimes you go and they've got good butterfat, but they just the shape of the cow is all wrong to be real productive.
well, hold your card back up one more time. And you talked about the last rib, so that's the diagonal angle there that you're talking about. And I see 2 other lines. You got from the hook to the pins, and then you have you know, underneath her chest there. Tell me what those lines are indicating.
Okay, so Ken Redman linear measured, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of cattle. And he taught the guy that taught Gerald. Anyway, he only used 9,500 all one breed, anywhere from Mexico to Canada. 3 commonalities with old cows that had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping. Well, head being on this, and they had a bigger belly. They had a bigger belly than the herd average. They could eat and digest enough for 3 in a drought after they'd lost their teeth. They had a wider butt. So here we are sitting on the bench again. They had a wider butt than the herd average. Oops. And then they had more slope from hooks down to pins. And to get the 9th, 10th, 11th calf in a row, that the graph of that slope from hooks to pins just cranked up at the end of the graph, where the others were just a general rising line of bigger belly and a general rising line of wider butt. it just cranked up at the end. And I called Ken and asked him why he thought that was. And he gave me all the usual suspects. Sitting here looking for a cap or something, but well, let's just say here's your pelvic opening. If you don't have adequate slope from hooks down to pins, okay, and that your Gene Meitler, it's what did he say? It's you've got the backboard and the rim, and if you don't have adequate slope, it's like you hinge the rim up towards the backboard. It's harder to get the basketball in there. Well, it's harder to get the calf out. That slope from hooks down to pins, if you've got that, you typically tend to have a vertical vulva. If you don't, you get the vulva tipping forward as you choose growth instead of fertility. You wind up getting a raised tail process and the vulva tipping forward. Well, if that vulva is forward and the feed isn't right, and you've got some foreign material and the bull shows up, it goes in the cow. She's not as able to digest as much as she used to when she had teeth. She gets cystic ovaries and can't breed back. Whereas if we've got adequate slope and the vertical vulva, one, probably nothing there, but even if bull does take something in, it can drain back out of the cow. So the three big things for Ken was a bigger belly than the herd average, a wider butt than the herd average, and then slope from hooks down to pins. Those were the three commonalities with cows that had 10 or 11 calves in a row without skipping.
And so the slope from hook to pins wasn't as much a conformational issue, i.e. calving ease. It was more of an indicator of fertility.
No, that if there's any way you could pull up that one skeleton thing out of the or I could share my screen, but that in the Bondsma lectures, I think it's page 22, there's a two skeletons side by side, and one where it's fairly flat and one where it's a little more slope. Well, two or three things. One, you're rarely going to find the frames, the slope that you need in tall, growthy cattle. The more you step on the growth gas pedal, the more you get the raised tail process and the vulva sloping forward. So those, like the drought we've had in the western U.S., half the cattle went to town. Well, if people were honest, the average frame score, what's left is probably a whole frame lower than it was when you started, because Mother Nature said, hey, that tall, growthy cow isn't going to work. The shorter frame, more slope, those cows tended to breed back even in a drought. So it's a function of the sex hormone shut off long bone growth. The taller the cows, everything else being equal. Everything I say, you got to think everything else being equal. The taller the cow, the less fertile. The shorter the cow, the more fertility, and of course the walking downhill on level ground on that dotted line on top, more estrogen, more fertility. So it's a function of size of the animal. You can get them too fat to rebreed. Well, if you've got cows that were made for 50 acres to the cow and you bring them to where it takes 2 acres to make a cow, they're going to get too fat to rebreed, whether their last rib is angled or not. But if you've got a bunch of cows with real vertical ribs, it's going to be super hard to make them function in just about any breed. Well, if you want cows with ribs that angle back, you've got to have bulls with real vertical ribs, which throws the shoulders apart, and then you get that bull that looks like he's walking uphill and the cow's walking downhill. Well, the opposite slope in the hooks, in the rib of the two animals. Bull's vertical. Cow, when you lean the ribs back, you lose a little bit of depth of chest there, but you gain guts. again, I get off in the weeds too easy.
No, I'm just trying to understand. And so if I'm hearing you right, bulls with vertical ribs are going to produce cows with sloped ribs.
100%. There you go. And that's, I guess the two biggest problems that I find is bulls. If you can find a bull with vertical ribs, he's going to be more walking uphill on level ground. He's going to be wider, toes pointing straight forward, or maybe slightly pigeon-toed. He's got a lot of width between the front legs. On a heart girth versus top line, heart girth on a bull or a steer versus the top line, the pin to the pole. For each inch that this heart girth is a bigger number than the top line. Is they found in the feedlot is 37 more pounds of gain and 37 fewer pounds of grain to do it, and it changes the steak to hamburger ratio because you get bigger ribeye steak where those ribs are vertical and throw the front shoulders wider apart on a bull. Virtually everything is the opposite on a bull and a cow, except for rump slope. If you don't have adequate rump slope in your cows, you need to find a bull with a lot of rump slope. Virtually everything else phenotypically is the opposite. Did I answer your question?
You did. So, and I want to get to cows, but if you're looking at two animals, and again, the whole major part of our purpose here is so that people showing cattle can bring cattle that are going to appeal to you. So if I've got two bulls and I've got one with vertical ribs, wider shoulder, bigger heart girth, but smaller testicles, and maybe not quite right testicles, how am I gonna, and then I've got another bull that's got massive, very correct testicles, but has slanted ribs. Like, I'm just trying to see how much weight you're putting on that compared to other traits. It's a tough question, I know.
No, it's good, and you know, there's this standard. Well, it depends, but
For sure.
in general, bulls, you know, head being on this end, you need more of this shape. If you can promote this in your bulls, you're going to get more of this, more fertility, more easy keeping in your cows. So I'm just going to say that it's 70-80+%
Shape.
the shape. But if you've got a bull with hypoplasia, I don't want to use him. You know, you just can't do that. I would gladly, and I didn't think a long time, but seriously, I would gladly take a bull that had this shape, that had smaller testicles, knowing that he can't get as many cows pregnant because his testicles are smaller. Let's just say they're just a small football instead of a large football. And back to shape of testicles, herd bull fertility by Drayson should look like a football, and length is more important than circumference. Length is more important than circumference. But I would take the bull that maybe his testicles were smaller, but he had the shape, trying to get, if the shape of somebody's cows is too far out, I would choose the shape of the bull over the size of the testicles. I don't want to promote
Right.
that looks like this with large testicles. That does not fix his cow herd. Did I get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's and as you say,
It depends.
Depends is the right answer for all consultant, because it 100% depends. And that goes back to my first question to you, is it's such a challenge to get people to put proper weight on the critiques that you give, because, you know, I'm paying you to come to my farm and break down my cattle, right? But how do they compare to the bigger picture? And do I understand what you're saying? So before I move into pictures, AJ, Steve, do you have follow-up questions on where we've covered so far?
I think for me it's more of a comment. Yeah, I was actually at a gentleman's farm, and he was kind of telling me what his bull evaluation process was. Um, and really, his bull evaluation process was done on a piece of paper by looking at the genetics, and he was looking at certain genetic factors and traits. And I'm standing there looking at the comparison of the two, and to my eye, it was like, wow, like this one was a superior bull, but you followed the paperwork because you wanted certain genetics in it. And I think that's what Steve's really going to help our event do is he's kind of, some of us might have got too caught up in the genetics and the paperwork side and following certain genetic traits, but they kind of missed the big picture of a phenotype and what you're looking for. So I think Steve can really kind of add that outside perspective at the show to kind of help us differentiate maybe what we've been missing at the trait in front of us.
AJ, if I might comment there, I was at a fellow's place 2 years ago. Long story short, I picked out 11 heifers, 10 for somebody else, one that was so good I wanted to buy her myself. And I said, well, tell me about the mothers. And he started talking about this one's mother and that one's mother and third one. And then he just stopped and he goes, And he looked at all the rest of them. He said, you just picked out the 10 heifers out of my 10 best cows that had heifers this last year. Well, I was simply going on phenotype, glandular function, butterfat indicators. Paperwork, I mean, this was a registered breeder. Paperwork didn't make any difference to me. It was what does the cow look like? It's that it depends. Well, it's more real world. Well, that's a longer discussion about close breeding, inbreeding, line breeding, years of thoughtful breeding. That's the way I like to describe it. Years of thoughtful breeding. Steve, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, so one of the things I've been working on here at Lamppost is from the rear end, I have too much of a like slope from the like tail to the pins, like this direction, as opposed to trying to level that out a little bit. Can you talk about that in that regard?
Well,
In
thinking about,
relationship to the other?
sorry, I covered you up. Say the last again.
In relationship to the other, the slope from hooks to pins.
Well, it's harder to see the slope from hooks to pins from the back than it is from the side. However, thinking about the dimensions of your front door versus the dimensions of your refrigerator. If you're looking at a cow from the back, the aspect ratio, how wide is she versus how tall is she versus how wide is she versus how tall is she? The wider they are, the wider the butt of that cow, the easier it is to get that calf out. The width of the muzzle is approximately equal to the width of the pin bones on the cow. Well, the pin bones are 80 to 90% as wide as the pelvic opening. So if you're looking at them from the back and you've got, 40, 45% as wide as tall and a wide muzzle on the cow, we're still looking for that slope, but you're probably not pulling calves. Whether she's got no slope or she's got a lot of slope, just the absolute width of that pelvic opening. I wish I'd have brought my handy dandy pelvis with me today on this trip to be able to pick that up and show it off. But who knows? Maybe I'll be the first judge at a Devon show that ever walks around the arena with a pelvis in his hand, showing, well, here's this cow, here's that one. Oh, here, look at this one. I don't know. We'll see.
That would be a first, but that's okay. That's okay. We like firsts. That would be awesome. Well, I am going to attempt here to share my screen. Again, I'll remind everybody I'm a farmer doing a podcast, not a podcaster running a farm. So bear with me. You guys can see the cow and my cursor.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So again, I want people to have an opportunity to go through their cows and have we don't want David Fell to have all the advantages. He's had Steve to his place several times going through the cows. We want everybody to know what Steve's really looking for. So I'll throw cows up and you kind of go through them, and we don't have to dwell on any animal for too long.
Well,
Just
could
kind of
you
open.
just draw the angle of that last rib for everybody there with your cursor? You start at the backbone and you can see how it's coming down at an angle. And if she were standing normal, that would probably be coming in just maybe right at her hoof or something. I would like that to be slightly higher on this cow. Show the top of the hook bone there, if you will. So she's down just slightly, pretty good. I mean, there are not a lot of cows that are better than that. But then you've got the pin bone back there on each side. And while you're right there at the tail, the smaller the diameter of the tail, well, if this is the pelvic opening and can you see this? You've got a tail that's this big in diameter back there. You can see how much of the pelvic opening it takes up. But if you've got a tail that's sticking this far down, a big fat tail, it's harder to get the calf out. Well, I like the diameter of her tail. How many acres does it take to run a cow in this particular environment of this picture we're looking at here?
2.5 to 3 acres per cow.
Okay, so show the top of her shoulder blade there. Yeah, so you can see that her backbone is sticking up just slightly. In this environment, that's fine. Out west, you don't want that backbone sticking up above the shoulder blade. The higher it's sticking up, the higher the maintenance of the cow. So maybe, I don't know, if it takes 50 acres to run a cow, I don't want to see that backbone sticking up above the shoulder blades. What time of year, do you have any clue when this picture was taken?
I don't. Looking at it, looks like stockpiled fescue grass to me. So I would guess December.
Okay. Well, she's doing pretty good, but we did that rib angle, and I would like to see a little bit more rib angle. Well, thinking of that and looking at her neck, a cow should have a U neck and a bull has a crest. Well, she should have a U neck. Well, with that rib angle, she's taking a little bit better care of herself. She doesn't have that U neck that I would hope to see that time of year. So if she had a little bit more rib angle back, the bottom of her chest might be an inch further off the ground. She'd probably have that U neck. And if they're not feeding any grain, she's taking a little bit. Doesn't mean she can't have calves. Her rump structure is better than most. But bone fineness looks pretty good. Looking at that tail, a pretty nice cow. Hopefully there will be better ones to win the show. And not that I'm dissing on this cow, but hopefully there'll be more fertile cows that cost less to run than this cow show up.
Steve, AJ, any comment on her before we move on?
I like how uniform her hair coat is. So
Very.
this cow, show her pin bones there. See all the fat over here? Well, if we could see her rib bone, looking at her depth of chest, if we could see her last rib bone, I would bet it would be almost coming down to the middle of her belly. She's too much of a brick on short legs to be real fertile. She's getting too fat to breed. I don't see much dewlap up front, but all that fat in the back. I had a cow kind of like this who I could not keep skinny enough. The first 3 calves were awesome. Finally, then she's in the second 21 days and kind of a dink, and I took her to Western Wyoming, where it took 125 acres to run a cow. And 18 months later, She had her dewlap back. She'd gotten rid of the excess fat, and she was back to having great calves again. Different horses for different courses. I didn't see one Clydesdale in the Kentucky Derby this year. Different horses for different courses. A cow like this might work good out there at the Arizona Strip, but in most pastures, you can't feed her little enough to keep her from getting too fat. All the bad stuff, pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, toxins, and hormones have an affinity for the fat. When she gets fat like this, and it's time to send progesterone back to keep the corpus luteum going, it gets gobbled up in her own fat, and she just cycles again and cycles again and cycles again. So she's not the right horse for the particular course that she's in, but it would take, boy, she's got a bald udder, nice tail, but see how her tail comes out and then kind of hangs down where that other one rounded in. Well, just that. More butter fat in the last one than in this one, where the tail excuse me, comes out and hangs straight down where that other one was kind of rounded in.
Does the set of her legs bring you any concern?
Well, because her hooks, which look to be fairly level with the backbone, but the grow bone is just keeps coming up, makes her stand a little post-legged. And so if you were watching her walk, that how do I do this? If this was the front hoof, the back hoof, you want it fore and aft. If this be the front of the cow, you want it fore and aft, landing where the front one took off, but slightly outside. If it were a bull, fore and aft, but you want that back one slightly inside. The front end of the bull is wider than the back end. The front end of the cow is narrower than the back end.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So you prefer the
bald udder.
first cat.
Bald udder.
She does have a bald udder, and she's slick, and I would say she's feminine. But I would agree with you. Obesity is her big problem.
Looking just past her right ear, it almost looks like she's got a crest. Cows don't have a crest, or shouldn't have. Cows should have a U neck. She's getting too fat to rebreed. Doesn't mean she can't, but sooner or later you keep doing what you're doing, and she's going to become infertile because she's too fat to rebreed. And all of these are, it depends. Okay, we're back to that first cow. There we go. Another cow. Well, you can see the tail process go up on her. Her neck is fairly flat. She's got a lot of vertical ribs in the neck. We haven't talked about this yet. Can you just run your cursor straight up and down there in her neck area? Yeah, so the more vertical folds there are, the looser the hide. The looser the hide, the more butter fat, the more tender the meat. She's fairly flat across the top of the shoulder blades. Can you see her last rib? It appears to be more of an angle back. Yeah. So that one would come in the hock, kind of like I've drawn here with the dotted line, somewhere between the hock and the ankle. Her biggest issue is that grow bone sticking up, but there's some fineness there. I would just want a bull with a lot of slope to correct that tail process. And her, don't sell the cow. Find a bull that has a lot of slope, and you'll get more slope in the cows. Find a bull with vertical ribs, and you'll continue to get that rear angled slope. She's got a bald udder, just
so correcting this will correct this.
Yeah, as the rump slope goes down, that slope from hooks to pins goes down, the pelvic opening. I don't know if we're sitting there and we're looking at her from the back and we've got that level pelvis versus when we get more slope, you can see how much the pelvic opening opens up. She does have a larger diameter tail right there where your cursor is. So she's the one with the with the big diameter tail rather than the small diameter tail. So it's taken up part of the pelvic opening. But, a decent cow, but she needs more rump slope, in my opinion, to be an awesome cow. But don't sell the cow. She can have calves where she's at.
How does the way her leg is back, does that change the view we're seeing there when it comes to the way the hip lays, and then the way the rib angles and all that stuff?
So how did that great question, Steve. Really good question. Jeremy, show her stifle muscle there, the stifle joint. Yeah. Up, no, a little lower. That's the hook. Down a little bit lower there. There you go. No, right there. So even with her leg back, she's got a big stifle muscle. The earlier in life you see that stifle joint muscle stick out, bull or heifer calf, the more fertile they are. But kind of back to your question there, Steve. I'm just looking for something here to help me out. As they go to walk, well, let me do it this way first. If this is the backbone and these are the hooks, as they weight each side, those hooks would be rocking up and like this. But as they, if here's the hook and the pin, as that leg goes back, you get this action too. Or if they've got adequate slope, as they go to walk, you get the pins bobbing down as that back hoof, sorry, stretches forward to be landing where the front took off. You're going to get that pin bobbing down when they're too flat in the hooks and pins. When they go to walk, that pin will be bobbing up because that leg is going back so far. So she has a little more slope than we're seeing in the photo because her left leg is back, causing the right hook bone, this is getting technical, to rotate up, and then the pelvis is twisting and that makes the left side look a little bit too flat. Sorry.
No, it's a good
question.
point. Same thing we were talking about that other cow maybe being post-legged. You're looking at a picture, right? Like you got to go make that cow walk and let her reset her feet a couple times before you do that. And you take enough pictures of a bad one, you can make them look pretty good, and then enough pictures of a good one, you can make them look bad. So I think that's a good disclaimer.
Okay, you can see in this cow a pointed pole. Can you put your cursor right on the top of her head there? Right there. So about as small as I've ever seen on a cow, as you take a golf ball and cut it in half and set it up on top of the head. That's tender meat. That's that's butter fat. So I'm always looking for that small diameter tailbone, small cannon bone, and from here it looks like I can see her right front there. That looks pretty good. Number one indicator of butter fat is a bald udder. Number one indicator of tender meat is that cannon bone. But number two is the amount of vertical folds. Well, you can see them even behind her front leg. They're back into her ribs. There you go. Yeah, right there. Her last rib angle could be a little more. Her hook bone is almost level with her backbone, which is great. She's got some slope from hooks down to pins. I can't really see the diameter of her tail. It's a good cow. I like her face. She looks like, again, she's in that place where it takes 2.5 acres to run a cow, and she needs to be in a place, this cow, where it takes 10 or 20 acres to run a cow. I'm afraid she's going to get too fat in the environment that she's in. But that's a pretty nice motherly looking cow. Sorry about my throat.
Is that something that you're gonna kind of tend to not favor an animal that's has heavy fat around the tail head, like a cow?
I'm probably going to say it just the way I say it. I like this cow. I think she's in the wrong environment. Be careful about how much you feed this cow. She looks like a productive cow, a little bit of a tilt to her udder, but again, no reason to sell the cow. It's just she's a little bit like that one that I sent to Western Wyoming, where it took 125 acres to run a cow. I think that cow's rib was a little more vertical than this. But that's what I would say, whoever's the owner, just be careful how much you feed her. Someone said, well, what if you had a bunch of cows that were all built like her? Well, yes, you could feed them little enough, but then your pastures are going to look like a tennis court when you pull them out, which isn't helping your grass. And we own cows to harvest our grass, not harvest our grain.
You could just run more cows on less acreage, right?
If you had more of her, yeah, you'd probably be into that total graze sort of a thing. And the people that do that, Jaime Elizondo, Johann Zeitzman thing, they tend to come back too quickly in that total graze deal. They don't give the grass, but we're not into grazing here. But yeah, you could run more cows and there would be more competition. Interesting story about competition, but we're not going there. For where she's at, she's on the edge of being too beefy. Again, if she went to a place where it took 10, 20, 30 acres to run a cow, 10 might be a minimum, but 20 or 30, she'd probably be getting along just fine.
But how, as a judge, do you, I mean, how much do you penalize the cow in the show because the owner's got the wrong cow for their environment, or they mismanaged them a little bit? How does that play into placing?
Great question. And one of those things that I'm going to have to think about when I'm there. I'm going to talk about, correctness here and here and here and here. Excuse me, this cow is getting too fat. But let's just say she's got more of what I like. It's like, I'm placing this cow as number one. You're feeding her too much. She's too fat. She's more fat than I want to see. But the shape of her appears to be the most fertile cow to me. And fertile and easy keeping are the two biggest things that I tend to look at. She's number one, and it's not because she's fat. A lot of judges are going to place her number one because she's fat. No, she's more put together structurally, glandularly, butterfat, yearly, if that's a word. And that's why she's number one. And it's not because of the fat. And I would be that emphatic about it. All right.
Oh, I appreciate you clarifying that.
Okay. I mean, if I had to, if she was the best cow but overfed, I'd say she's overfed and she's not number one because of the fat. She's number one because look at these cannon bones and look down here in the I can't see it from here. From her hock down, you see how the back, we've got this dip in the outside. I mean, boy, there's tender meat, there's butter fat, and I don't know what her calf is. Again, the calf is your trump card. She can check every box I want to see. Like Gene Meitler says, any one cow can make a liar out of you. She might have the worst calf of the whole deal and check all the boxes. And here's another cow that doesn't seem to check any boxes, and she has the best calf. Well, the home field advantage, she's set up for where you live, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's probably exactly how I would say it. If she needed to be placed first, it would be not because she's fat. You got to look past the fat to this structure is what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. And to your point, we look at phenotype, and Steve Montgomery talked about pedigree earlier. We look at these things to make decisions, but performance and production is what it really comes down.
There we go.
And you should know more about your cows than anybody you bring in if you're keeping those records and paying attention. And I'm going to show you one more cow and then we'll move to some bulls. Oh, wait, that's not a cow. See if I can find, well, we'll look at this cow first.
Well, I wish she were in the sun. Um, so her tail process is decent. I mean, show her hook bone there in the front of the pelvis. See, that looks like it's down. You would like to see that level backbone. How do we do this? Backbone, hook bone, backbone, or hook bone, backbone, hook bone. If the backbone's higher, you've lost some of that pelvic slope. Okay, so she's down slightly there, but you know the rump rounds slightly, the tail rounds slightly. She's got a big switch. I don't know how long since she calved. Vulva's fairly engorged. She looks like she's got a little more hair on her udder. Okay, I was just talking about a rear cannon bone, Jeremy. So right below the hock on the other leg, you see there's a little dark line. Run your vertical straight up and down right there. Right behind the front of that cannon bone, just behind it, you can kind of see a dark line. Well, if I were to take that cannon bone that's like here and turn it this way and get it to where we can see it, that dark line signifies there's an indentation on the outside. That's very tender meat. That'd probably be along the line of an indentation in the rear, the last rib, which would coincide with an indentation in the jaw. Classic Livestock Management Services out of Australia got 99 out of 100 correct on double A2 milk, A1, A2, or double A1 milk against DNA by just feeling the bones and the hide. Well, looking at that rear cannon bone, which you don't see very often, that little dark strip there that you were showing with your cursor, you don't see that very often. She gets good marks from me for that. She's got a bit of a U neck. I wish it were lighter to be able to see that cow, but a younger cow. I don't know how old she is, 2 or 3.
I'm not sure, but a younger cow than the others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Steve, I mean, you talked about the fact that she may have calved recently. To me, when I saw this, I thought, oh, she's coming up to calving.
Well, and maybe she is. I can't see the pancreatic world, but I just looking at how big her vulva is there, it doesn't look like she's been nursed. So maybe she is coming up to calving.
I guess the question I would have then is what happens to the hips and the adjustment and the process of preparing for calving?
Was that you, Steve, that was talking about you've got too much of a tent versus not wide enough?
Yes.
Those muscles will relax right there by the tail head to allow everything to open up. The tail, I mean, you got vertebra here, and then you've got that tail process, and it can only go so far. And it's, to go further up, I got to tear some muscles here. Hopefully nobody on the that's seen this has ever experienced. This was other people's cattle, but they had, thinking back, they had heifers that were too flat, and then this pelvic opening, the tail process could only go up so far. Well, they would tear the ligaments here to get that calf out, and then they'd lay there paralyzed for 3 or 4 days before they could get back up and walk around. Sometimes they never got back up. You went out and shot the animal and buried it. Well, then they always looked like they were kind of broken in the back from then on. They before they calved, they were like, well, let's say they had a Dray's tail process, and after that, they just looked like they were broken in the back. It's like you'd stuff 2 animals together because they stretched those ligaments out, and they never got a chance to go back the other way. I don't know that I described that very well or not either. I'm sitting here looking at my picture and trying to use my hands to do different things. But that, whether she's the refrigerator or the front door, that it's going to be much easier to get the calf out with that aspect ratio that's 43% as wide as they are tall. So did I get there, Steve, with your?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like when we first evaluated the top of the hooks,
Uh-huh.
and her being below the spine, it
Well,
made
the
me
more
wonder.
slope there is, the less this has to open up to get the calf out. The smaller the diameter of the tail, the less this has to open up to get the calf out.
Sure.
Okay.
Last cow for you, Steve.
Well, her hooks are down below the backbone in the raised tail process. I can kind of see in my eye the angle of that last rib, and looking at it, her left leg is forward, and the last rib would be pointing to the ground in front of that left leg. Well, her ribs are too vertical. Her pelvis is too flat. She's too deep in the chest. You see all that fat there in the back end there by the pins, hooks to pins. Boy, she's got bone fineness. She's got a great hair coat, a lot of vertical folds. She's got a U-neck. Butter fat's really good. She's in the wrong environment. You know, good looking cow, but I'm afraid she's going to get too fat to rebreed. And she's wide enough. I'll bet if you were in the back end, she'd be this aspect ratio so she can get the calf out. But it's if we keep promoting that tail process over time, our breed up and maybe I should say our weaning rate would just keep tending to go down and down and down the more we tend to promote that kind of a tail process versus the slope from hooks down to pins.
Hey, Jeremy and Steve, will you guys point out and clarify the U-neck that you're referring to?
So it right in front of the shoulders, it drops down and then comes back up. Jeremy, on those slides that I sent you, there were a couple, if you want to share those with AJ and Steve later on, there were two Herefords. There was a picture of two Herefords. And if you just go back and forth and all you look at is the lower jaw, the fertile, you hardly see it. The infertile, there's a great big one. The fertile, you hardly see it, the great big one. Then you look at the neck. The fertile one has a U-neck. The infertile one has almost a crest, a U-neck, almost a crest. You look at the brisket, there's a lot of dewlap left versus it's tight. Horns, I wanted to comment on this cow's horns. I like how small in diameter and fine they are. The less fertile, the larger in diameter the horns are going to be. Sex hormone shot off all bone growth. I always heard it was long bone, all bone growth. The smaller the bones, the more sex hormones. I've never said it that way before, but that rhymes, and I'm going to use that again.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to some bulls. Thank you. Hopefully that gives breeders a little bit of insight as to what you're
Jeremy,
looking for.
if I will, she doesn't have this shape. You know, she's too deep in the chest. She's flat on top from shoulders back to hooks. She's not walking downhill. A lot of good qualities there, but she's in the wrong environment, and I would want to breed that rump slope, more rump slope into her. And you're going to go halfway from where the bull is to where the cow is. You're going to do that, and in at 3/4, maybe you've got what you're looking for.
Hey, Steve, I think a lot of times in our society and where if you pick out a certain thing, people will focus in on it and then they'll do too much of it. How often have you seen too much slope?
Never. I literally have never seen it. So I've got one of those pictures. There was a white face this is a South Pole cow down by Austin, Texas, and she's probably in the wrong environment. But that white-faced South Pole that I sent those pictures, she probably had more rump slope and walking downhill more than any other cow I've ever seen. And boy, was she small. She was from down just north of Houston, and she was just fit to her environment. But boy, was she a small cow. I mean, maybe a frame 2.5 or something. For me, it's you start getting above 5 and you have a hard time maintaining fertility. But you get down to a 3, our efficiency starts going away when you get them too small. So I don't know. I did grass finishing for 20 years, and that 4-frame cow just seemed to check a whole bunch of boxes for me. But it depends on where you live. On to bulls. Okay. So he's got a crest. I think we can all see that. I like how small and pointed his ears are. Boy, small pointed ears are a good thing. He's slightly walking uphill from hooks up to the backbone above the shoulder blades there. The hooks appear to be fairly level with his backbone, and he's got some slope. I wish he had a little more slope down to the pins. I don't like this kink right at the end of his tail where it goes up. Again, back to those 2 skeletons, Jeremy, when you guys share on the one on the left, you'll see that kink. And that's easier to breed out that little kink than just that whole grow bone sticking up like that. But his last rib, if you can pick out where his chine starts there, the T-bones behind and no further forward, a little further, a little further, a little further, a little more, a little right there. Okay, if from there down to his prepuce, maybe just slightly behind where your cursor was, the more vertical there you go, right there. From there down to the prepuce, maybe slightly in front. That's the rib angle you're looking for on a bull. He's not overly fat. You see the dewlap in the front there, and in his brisket, he's still got some loose hide. This fan muscle, I wish I had control, right behind his front shoulder going back over the ribs is pretty nice. His testicles appear to be very even, bald scrotum. He does not have a large diameter tail. He would help most herds. He's darker in the front half and lower on the body, so more testosterone. I would like a bull with more slope from hooks down to pins, because 95% of the commercial breeders out there, that is the biggest problem that they have in their herd. And back to this vertical rib. At a year of age, for each inch, the shoulders are wider than the length of the rump being from the pins to the front of the hooks. So at a year of age, for each inch, the shoulders are wider than the length of the rump. This is Michael McDonald now. It's 2.5 days less gestation. That's about a 5-pound lighter calf. At a year of age, each inch is about 2.5 days less gestation. Well, each inch, the more vertical the rib, the wider it is between those front legs, the more the front toes are, instead of splayed out, they're straightforward or slightly pigeon-toed without grain. The wider he is between the top of the shoulder blades, the bigger the ribeye muscle, the higher the steak to hamburger ratio. A bull's head should be half as wide as it is long. Frank E. Thorne had a red Angus bull named Pawpaw, and at 6.25 years old, his shoulders were 8.5 inches wider than the length of his rump. So you want to look at something on your phone and you go like this. However, I can get my fingers to work, and everything grows at the same rate. Well, testosterone makes the shoulders grow wider faster than anything else in the body. Progesterone makes the rump grow wider faster than anything else in the body. Frank put that bull in with 100 15-month-old heifers in a 4,600 acre pasture. And 60 days later, there were 92 pregnant heifers, but it was a long walk home. That one bull trying to find 100 heifers in 4,600 acres is a big job. But at a year of age, the wider those shoulders, the more cows he's going to breed his entire life. Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to move a little quicker just
Okay.
because of time, but
Okay.
I'm going to be quiet and let you just keep rolling on.
Okay, so again, walking uphill, more of a crest than the other one. He doesn't have the little kink, but his hooks are about level with his back. He's got a little slope. I would like to see a little more slope. He's got what I call a throat latch. So put your cursor right behind his pole there on the top of his neck there, and then go straight down to his, okay, everything else being equal, that's something to look for, that throat latch look in a bull. They tend, for whatever reason, and I haven't figured it out yet, they tend to be a little better bull if they have that look. He's got a little bit of that muscled look on the back end. I had a bull something like this, and I called Gerald one time and said, I like his shoulders. You can see, instead of a stifle muscle, you can see the muscle pop out there on his front leg. There you go. I said, boy, I told Gerald, I really like his front end, but he doesn't have much of a back end. And Gerald said, I think every defensive player in the NFL knew how big Jim Brown's shoulders were. I doubt one of them could have told you what size pants he wore. That guy's got a huge thymus muscle. You see that dark hair going clear up almost to the top of his crest there, that hair going uphill, the dark hair, just in front of that, there, that big, the bigger that is, the better. We can move on. I like this bull. Okay, that mossy hair coat will work in the colder environments. It's hard to get that to work where it's hot and humid. Put your cursor on his pole. Probably has a bit of and move it away just slightly. Okay, that's fine. Probably has a bit of a pointed pole. I always like to see the hair worn off on the pole because he likes practicing basketball rather than watching it from the couch. He's got small pointed ears. He's got a good crest. And his tail process is better than most of the ones we've looked at. His bone fineness is not quite as good as I would like to see. Having a hard time in the front, but that rear cannon bone, I would like a finer bone back there. And his tail is okay. He could have a smaller diameter tail, but in general, it looks to be maybe 3 years old or something. Bulls should be walking uphill on level ground. And if they're not doing it by 3, they're probably not going to be doing it. If you find one at 2 that's walking uphill, he's probably going to really turn into a man. We can go on. She's walking uphill, even though she's even though she's on a little bit of an incline, she's not walking downhill. She's not this wedge shape. Okay. And she's flatter in the hooks and pins. Anyway, we can go to that next photo. So a younger animal, getting a bit of a crest there. His tail process is up a little bit. I wish I could see when you're taking a picture from above, the animals appear to be smaller than they actually are. When you're taking a picture from below them, they look bigger than they actually are. A little bit again of that mossy hair coat, which is going to struggle in hot, humid environments. When it starts to get hot, if you'll take your shears and just shear about a foot wide down the backbone, That's about 90% as effective at getting rid of the heat as if you sheared the whole animal, just a squirrel there. More of a rounded crest. We can go on. We can go on to the next animal. I like this animal just right off the bat better than the last one because his top line seems to be better shape. A little more rounded in the pole there. Can't really see much else. Is he even a yearling or is he just like 10 months old in the photo? I again, I wish he had a little more slope from hooks down to pins. And he's just coming out of winter or something, looking at what he's standing in there. Would that be right, Jeremy?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah. So probably not even quite a yearling yet, but his face proportions are okay. He could be a little bit blockier headed, a little bit wider muzzled. Same animal? Different?
No, I think different animal.
Okay.
I think.
Different animal. So if you want cows with big bellies, you don't want to go find a bull with a big belly. He might like being a couch potato. You want a bull whose mother, grandmother, aunts, and sisters all had big bellies. You'd know now we're breeding easy keeping into the offspring. It's not the bull with the biggest belly. He might be lazy. But he's got adequate depth up front. We're a little bit far away to do much. Again, I would like to see more slope from hooks down to pins. I would like to see that tail rounded down rather than the going straight back like it is. I would like to see it starting to round down on the. There you go. Yeah, yeah, from hooks down to pins. And why am I so hard about that? It's the biggest problem that I've seen in the past in cow herds. His aspect ratio is more this. I would like to see a little more of this. It's more important in the cow, but I don't know from here looking at how he slopes off so much from each side. I don't think you're going to see what you're looking for when you get the side view.
How much do you worry about the width of his tail? He looks to have quite a meaty tail.
Well, I think it's all frizzed out, but a small diameter tail on a bull is going to give you a small diameter tail on a cow, which is we're taking up less of that pelvic opening. Just spilled the last of my coffee on me. Anyway, I'm not looking for a large diameter tail. I'm on a calf, cow, whatever. But while we're right there, if you could move that tail off to the side, bull or heifer, the more vertical folds there are from on a heifer or a cow from the vulva down to the udder, the more butterfat. They almost always turn into really good cows. Well, he's beefy. I can't
see a whole lot. Yeah.
Well, it appears from here that he's pigeon-toed. Is that adequate? Do you think so? He's standing kind of funny in the front or something. I think he's wider than he actually looks there. His head's pretty good, small pointed ears. I can see he's got a big crest. Speaking of crest, that pawpaw bull, his crest was bigger than his head. It was a beach ball up there on top of his head, but this is a pretty beefy bull. I wish I could see his rib angle. But it doesn't appear that his tail process is going up. It may be rounded down back there. Yeah, yeah. But they're above him. I like zooming in when I go to take a picture of an animal and then vary your distance. But two, then kneel down or get to the same height so that you're taking a picture basically at mid rib or slightly above that. You don't want to be standing up and taking a picture down. It's harder to get a good view of an animal when you're taking a picture from up above. But we could have a whole talk about what you could see by looking from up above.
Well, and I think people take pictures at different angles because some make some look better and some look worse. uh, so what's the purpose of the picture, right? Is it to get an accurate view of the animal or for marketing purposes? I imagine people do it for the same. Well, I think we've accomplished what we wanted, Steve. I know, as a annual consigner to this event, I now have a better appreciation. We'll pay extra attention to that angle from hooks to pins and looking at ribs.
Jeremy, if I may, that last rib angle deal, oh darn it, went down to Gene Meitler's probably in 17 or 18 for the first time, and it took me 18 months before I finally figured out what I was actually looking out there at Gene Meitler's. He had bred bondsman, or in the bondsman fashion, he'd bred Herefords for 45 years at that time. In 17, yeah, and in, well, wait a minute, in 19 was 45, so it's 43. But anyway, it took me 18 months before I realized that rib angle and how to equate that and how that figured into linear measuring and taking care of calves and whatnot. That was a huge aha for me, was figuring out that last rib angle. And I have these cards give away at the thing, but that it's kind of your pasture cheat sheet. On the back, it talks about butter, fat, and glandular function, but they cost about $1 a piece. But I want to leave something behind. I want somebody to go out in the pasture and go, she fits the bill. No, not, yeah. Now, that's cows according to Steve Campbell. Maybe that's cows according to nobody else.
Well, I think it takes a good man, a good cow man, and a good man to say that, because I always remind people, the outcome of the show is one man's opinion on one day, one glimpse in time, not getting to see production, not knowing all the epigenetic factors that go into this cow's condition. And one thing Gerald always said that I loved was, a cow's born with this genetic potential, and all these management things and epigenetic factors hack away at the animal's ability to reach that genetic potential and to express that genetic potential. And I think that's 100% true. And
I'm glad you said it.
So yeah, take it all with a grain of salt. But if it gets you to go out and observe your cattle and do a constructive evaluation, and then keep records and find out if the things that Steve has said weigh true in your herd, or the things that me or another guest has said, and
Jeremy, if I
put
may,
it into play.
If you went, and Cal's head being here, if you went to Vegas and bet money, I'm not suggesting you do that, but you bet on this cow to win and this cow to lose, you will make more money betting on this one to win and this one to lose in a pasture situation.
Phenotype is huge. And awesome. Well, David Fell is our show manager. His information will appear as well. Reach out to him with any questions about classes or blood work you have to get into the event. And we look really forward to having Steve there. And I love judges that explain the why, right? I may not agree with your why, and I may 100%, but I want to know why I lost, or why this cow was put above that cow. And you've done a good job of that today, so I thank you, and I look forward to Southwest Project Grass.
If I may have to ask you, well, now how much more time do I have in this class? Because I'll be out there explaining why a whole lot.
Well, I think people will keep you there a week if history is a guide. I think one of our most popular things we do year in and year out is that critical evaluation. And maybe it's in the show ring, maybe it's 4 or 5 steers in a pen. Maybe it's a group of cows on the side of the road as we're going out to have lunch after the meeting. But doing that evaluation is huge, and people that are willing to share what they've learned and their thoughts is wonderful. And I've said this before, but the biggest advance in our organization in the last 20 years is that we're made up of members now that have to make a living with their cattle. They're not a tax write-off. They're not a yard ornament. They're not there because they're a heritage breed and we're trying to preserve something. They're there because they're the world's best breed on grass. They make gourmet quality meat from marginal pastures, but how we manage them is critical. And real world evaluation. I didn't hear you once say you wanted a tailhead that sloped up at a severe angle, which is what we saw at Kyle a couple years back. The show ring has designed a different animal away from production and for something somebody liked. But glad we have a judge that's out doing it in the real world. And thank you for your time today. And anybody else, any closing comments before we sign off?
No,
I'll just say, go ahead, Steve. You can go ahead.
I'm just thankful for your comments, Steve. I look forward to seeing you in person. And I do want to say that if any of those cattle you just did an evaluation on were Jeremy's, I think they should be automatically disqualified. So therefore,
I like that.
yeah.
Except the one he really liked, right? I can bring her.
No. That's the one he wants to disqualify.
That's right. Yeah.
Jeremy's feeding too well.
No, I just wanted to say, Steve, I'm encouraged that you're working with a lot of commercial herds and helping with efficiency there, because I think that's definitely needed in the beef industry for sure. So
Well,
thank you. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, gentlemen. God bless you all. And we'll put links and stuff up and look forward to the next episode of the Devon Corner. God bless.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.